This is GTV, always in search of the smoking gun. Time to go back to the well and dig up a well-worn, though always beloved, piece of Nintendo history, the Zapper light gun. I'm not going to get too into the weeds with the backstory, but it turns out light gun technology is actually pretty old, going back to the early 20th century. Light gun games were common in arcades, evolving from shooting gallery games that used real firearms. They came home in the 1970s and hung in there for a while, still maintaining their popularity well into the PlayStation era. Today, motion-controlled games often imitate older light guns, so the concept never really went away. For many, the gold standard was the Nintendo Zapper, included with most editions of the Nintendo Entertainment System back in the late 1980s. Of course, Sega had the Light Phaser, sharing the same design from the most awesome gun to ever exist, the Zillion. Atari had one too, but since the status quo of video games seems to revolve around the influence of the NES, either real or imagined, the Zapper is the de facto standard when it comes to the light gun. Of course, if you had the original gray gun sold until 1988, you had a lot more gamer cred than if you had the orange one that came later. And oh, how fun it was! Hey, remember Duck Hunt? I loved blasting away at those ducks. I'm sure I wasn't the only one, being the arcade version at my local 7-Eleven. Of course, what else could you really do in a light gun game besides shoot moving targets? Not much. Nintendo tried something novel with Gumshoe, where each shot made the character jump. It was a strange experiment that didn't work. Personally, I felt that Hogan's Alley was the best game of the original light gun series, my personal favorite, and the closest you could get to a realistic simulation of using an actual gun. But I always wondered, who was Hogan, the supposed owner of this alley? Was it a tribute to Hogan's Heroes? Hulk Hogan? The Hogan family? Well, we do live in the future, so it is quite easy to search on the internet and find that there is a real-life Hogan's Alley used by the FBI for training purposes. Obviously, this must be where Shigeru Miyamoto got the idea from. The facility was opened in 1987? Well then, this is an anachronism, because Hogan's Alley, the game, was first released in 1984. So did the FBI just happen to be playing some NES one day and said, hey, you know what? We should do what this game is doing. It would be good training for us. No, that obviously didn't happen. To find the source, you need to go back 90 years before the game existed. In 1895, not 1985, but 1895, a comic titled Hogan's Alley appeared in the New York World newspaper, which was in print from 1860 until 1931. Created by Richard F. Outcault, the comic portrayed a stereotypical view of Irish immigrant life in a New York City slum named Hogan's Alley. Hogan was never shown, though being an Irish name, it was more than enough to imply a certain kind of imagery. Hogan's Alley featured a cast of characters that were poor, uneducated, diseased, criminal street urchins. The breakout star of Hogan's Alley was Mickey Dugan, a young boy with a shaved head wearing only a yellow nightshirt. The character would soon earn the nickname the Yellow Kid. Mickey was so popular, he began to appear in the rival crosstown paper, the New York Journal, while still appearing in the World. Hogan's Alley ended in 1898, but the character of Mickey Dugan lived on into the 20th century. The Yellow Kid was featured in various advertisements across America, as well as on the cover of sheet music for Tin Pan Alley songs that helped convey the origins of said music. In the 1920s, the United States Army National Board for the Promotion of Rifle Practice, in coordination with the National Rifle Association, established a training facility at Camp Perry in Erie Township, Ohio. The grounds featured tactical training courses to increase marksmanship skills and public safety. At Camp Perry, a mock town square was built where hostage standoffs and other situations were reenacted. For the sake of safety, paper cutouts of human targets were installed in windows and were mechanized to move in and out of sight. This fake town adopted the moniker Hogan's Alley, referring to the crime-filled slum where the Yellow Kid hails from. When the United States entered World War II, Hogan's Alley closed down as the U.S. military reorganized itself for the war effort. Though the program was no longer active, the term Hogan's Alley was still used, informally, to refer to these training exercises. Following the Japanese surrender in 1945, the United States occupied the American leadership and influence, as well as the firearms training exercises themselves, led to the term Hogan's Alley entering the Japanese language, and, over time, being understood throughout Japan. When Nintendo developed the Zapper light gun in the 1980s, 3 target practice games were developed, with Wild Gunman adopting an Old West theme, Duck Hunt employing a modern sport theme, and Hogan's Alley utilizing a police training theme. The 3 games were released in Japan first, in 1984, and then came to the West the next year. While the Hogan's Alley video game was a well-known title in the early days of the NES, the term came back into mainstream American consciousness in 1987, when the Federal Bureau of Investigation revived the Hogan's Alley training program and facility in Quantico, Virginia, a fully built mock town that resembles both the Hogan's Alley of the 1920s and 30s, as well as the video game. Was the FBI aware of Hogan's Alley, the video game? Well, anything is possible. But the continued informal use of the term points to the game having no influence over the program. And to bring things full circle, Hogan's Alley, the comic, had a semi-revival beginning in 1994. Hogan's Alley, the magazine, dedicates itself to promoting print comics and preserving that classic turn-of-the-century art style that its namesake made so popular. So, the next time you sit down for a quick game of Hogan's Alley, you'll know the origins of its unusual name. Feel free to share the story with a friend, too, if you like. But I won't hold a gun to your head over it.